The Green Party specifically, and we're talking now about the 1970s when it first kicks off, people might be surprised to learn it was a Conservative councillor. There was a guy called Tony Whitaker, and his wife had a meeting in a pub to discuss what they saw as the terrifying issue of overpopulation. If anything, a lot of people these days are realising that it's the opposite problem we might be having, but nevertheless, that was where that originally came from. They form a party called People, I believe. It then eventually gets rebranded as the Ecology Party and then eventually the Green Party in the mid-1980s. So the roots of environmentalist politics are by no means left-wing. I think it's just we live in an era where the categories got a little bit scrambled, and also because the left, generally speaking, have embraced environmentalism in quite a big way. But I suppose if we're going full circle back to the question of why are Greens allying with Islamism, why is the older left allying with Islamism? In a way, it makes more sense for the Greens to do it because they have been kind of reactionary, anti-Enlightenment and regressive from the off, whereas it might not have always been the case in terms of certain left-wing moments.
That's interesting. But then today's Green Party and today's your party, are they ultimately the same thing as sort of Greta Thunberg wet dream?
It's really hard to tell the difference between the two. And that's one thing which Zach Polanski was speaking about very explicitly in his campaign, was that he would welcome Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana into the Green Party, even if that's not policy. He would be very happy for that to happen. They're clearly trying to kind of fish in the same waters to a certain extent, wanting to pick up support, yes, amongst the sort of students and overgrown students of Bristol or Brighton Pavilion or what have you, which have kind of been the base for both Greenism and Corbynism for quite some time, but also to try and use the Gaza issue to kind of lean in some instances, I think, to a kind of Islamic sectarian politics to also gain a foothold in certain constituencies. And whilst this, whether we're talking about your party or the Green Party, they might not be able to command majority support or anything like that. There could still be a big problem, particularly for Keir Starmer, particularly because the Labour Party defending certain seats where they've got larger Muslim populations who are very concerned with the Gaza issue. You've got people like Jess Phillips in Birmingham or Wes Streeting in Ilford with tiny majorities now, partly because of the way this issue has been sort of weaponized against them. So it's something which, even though that might remain pretty marginal, broadly speaking, to where public opinion is at, it is still something which could be a real factor in the next election. And also the fact that this kind of obnoxious alliance is rearing its head again is something that anyone who's got a good head on their shoulders should be concerned about, even if it is just happening at the fringes.
Do you feel like without October 7th, they wouldn't have anything to talk about? Like, what would they all be fighting for? Would it maybe still be Gaza?
Well, this is interesting because it's quite clear that kind of anti-Israel sentiment is the glue that is holding some of these quite unlikely alliances together. To park the Green Party for a moment, I mean, your party has been having some really interesting internal fights at the moment. So you will remember there was a small group of supposed kind of Gaza independents who were elected at the last election. These weren't members of any formal political party, but they all ran as independents on the Gaza issue. And now some of them, people like Adnan Hussein in Blackburn, are seemingly quite open to working with your party. I'm not sure if he's formally joined, but he chaired a meeting in Blackburn with Jeremy Corbyn just a couple of weeks ago. But he's also socially conservative British Muslim who has made pretty clear that he's not on board with this gender ideology nonsense. And so he's been getting brickbats. People like Zara Sultana have had to kind of respond to the question of, where is your party going to sit on these issues? And on the Green Party side, even though I said we'd park it, there's a similar thing going on with Mothin Ali, incidentally, who's had to kind of, because of the fact that, as you might gather, he's pretty socially conservative. He has been in for a certain amount of flack because of the fact that he is quite clearly not willing to say, for instance, that trans women are women. But I suppose it's testament, whilst this makes it very unstable, and you think, how could this possibly hold for that long? Maybe it is just Israelophobia is such a strong pull for certain people in certain sections of politics that they are willing to look past those differences, which is a depressing conclusion to come to, I suppose.
I'm thinking more and more about how different Islam is from other belief systems. I was just walking my dog the other day through an area that's very, vibrantly multicultural, let's say. And it was actually mad because my dog's particularly cute. It's a very cute cream dachshund, like long haired, and she's going up and licking everyone and having a great time. And people stop us a lot to talk to the dog. And loads and loads of people with brown skin come over and love the dog, and they say they speak, even if they have accents, they'll almost have English humor, and they say, "Oh, we might take her home with us," and those kinds of things. And those people are, it's not 90%, it's 100% of them are Hindu or Sikh, And you can tell because they're, red dot and things like that. Whereas 100% of Muslims, who are about half of the sort of brown-skinned people, dive out the way. They make spitting noises at us. They look at us disgusted. Some are scared. Some are angry that we've got this little tiny dachshund. Now, I know that's dogs, but I do think that shows how different this one belief system is. And that's why I get frustrated that some people say, Tommy Robinson's racist, or people are racist, because the Hindus and Sikhs are so well integrated and no one cares. I've never said a bad word about any of them. I don't know. I mean, at what point do people wake up? The reason I mentioned the dog issue is because I think that British people are dog lovers. We love dogs. And it's just the ultimate sign of a huge difference in character. How do we wake up the rest of the country to this?
I mean, the dog one is not one I've come across beforehand.
They hate dogs.
I must admit, but
they hate dogs. Hasidic Jews hate dogs as well, right? So, but if we had 5 million Hasidic Jews in this country running for parliament, getting into position, I'd go, hang on a minute, guys. Not just because of the dog issue, obviously, but it's a sign of a culture that is clearly living. Because you cannot live in the UK and be part of the society. I know some people are allergic, some people are scared of dogs. Fine, but in general, as a group of people, you can't do that and still be so angry about dogs walking around.
Well, I think the primary issue, which is really kind of cuts across a lot what we've been talking about as well, is the extent to which a kind of Islamic sectarianism and Islamic identity politics, all the way through to a kind of form of actually quite clear Islamism at the edges, has just become a political factor, an electoral political factor in a way that might not have been previously. And that's something that anyone who cares about a properly kind of reasoned democratic public sphere should be concerned about. Ultimately, we would be concerned if it was any religion that was trying to kind of wade in to these matters, but it's quite clearly disproportionately in relation to Gaza, in relation to questions of Islamic identity politics, in relation to those sorts of religious questions. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us to take that quite seriously, because this stuff is poison. I think the point at which you have candidates, parties appealing to voters on the basis of exclusively of faraway conflicts and basically kind of ginned up religious ethnic grievance is the signs of a society that's starting to come apart in a quite meaningful sense. It's interesting the way the Labour Party have really been hit by this now, insofar as at the last election, some candidates losing out to ones who are running on this issue, as well as some even quite prominent figures we've talked about. Jess Phillips, we talked about Shabana Mahmood, having a lot closer run in their constituencies because the issues of Gaza, because this kind of Islamic sectarianism is being used against them. At the same time, Labour bear a hell of a lot of the blame for getting us into this situation in the first place. They have been very willing for a very long time to use not just Israel-Palestine, but also the Kashmir issue, all sorts of other conflicts, all sorts of other issues around, to gin up their voter bases, to try and practice a kind of like pork barrel identity politics. And rather than to address voters as you are constituents with certain interests, certain things that you might be concerned about in the local area or nationally, to treat the electorate as these kind of ethno-religious blocks to be kind of stacked up, and that's how you get a majority. And it was inevitable that it was going to be used against them at some point. And that's what we're starting to see now in the form of these independents, in the form of, arguably, we'll see what happens with Greens and your party. But it doesn't make it any less poisonous, the fact that it's faintly amusing that Labour are now being hit by this.
But it's also just how democracy works. If you have enough people from a certain area whose interests lie in that particular area, parties are going to try to appease them.
There is that, but at the same time, I think there's also, we do have to at least acknowledge the society into which people have been arriving into. And it is a society in which we have preached multiculturalism, in which we have politicians who have constantly looked to appeal to voters on the basis of what divides them rather than what unites them, not to get too chocolate box about it.